Join us for the annual Walk and Wheel on Sunday, September 22nd to end ALS. We've high-fived thousands of participants, raised millions of dollars, and impacted hundreds of families. With your help, the good keeps growing. Register at walkandwheelnm.org. See you there.
Hey, good evening, Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're coming live on the Pit Press Live Monday or Tuesday, September 17th. Not with the original crew tonight. We got Ryan stepping out. He's taking a break. But we do have some familiar faces, and we do have a special guest in Mr. Coach Tom Moser. We're going to kind of change the theme of tonight's show. I know we want to get to UNM football, recap the Auburn loss on Saturday. Again, very promising show with, again, the first half. But we want to start today's show with a little bit of hoop stuff. That's kind of how we started our show, the Pit Press Live, what we really started to dig into. And with conference realignment and the Pac-6 and media dollars being thrown around everywhere, we thought it was appropriate to address kind of the elephant in the room and really dive into how all of this affects college basketball, specifically in the Mountain West. But before we jump into kind of the meat of the discussion and start to dissect everything, let me get to the guests on the show this evening. One of the normal guys that comes on likes to talk a lot of hoops, former football player, former St. Pius offensive lineman, two-time state offensive lineman of the year, or I'm not sure. I'm not doing the Ryan Tamari thing very good, but Rick Thompson, man, how you doing?
I'm doing good, guys. Always good to have Coach Moser on. You know, when I see his tweets go out, I treat them like gospel. And I know basketball season is near when I see his Twitter getting active again. I always enjoy his thoughts, and I'm also happy to talk about some football and other events in the Mountain West. So thanks for having me.
And ProView Networks broadcaster, just half of the Nunez duo, Mr. Nick Nunez. How you doing tonight, man? Nice shirt.
Oh, thank you, Eric, Rick, Coach Moser. Happy to be on with you guys tonight. I agree. It's nice to switch gears and talk about some Mountain West basketball, considering the recent news that we've learned. But just happy to be on with you guys. Happy to talk about that, UNM football, and ready to get into it.
And last but certainly not least, Coach Tom Moser. He's been on our show several times and follows Mountain West basketball all the way from the East Coast, but he knows the league pretty much inside and out. And like Rick had said, it's his tweets are pretty godly, and you follow them as close as anybody else. Coach Moser, how you doing, man? Thanks for coming on tonight.
Yeah, my pleasure, Eric. Thanks for having me. Nick, Ricky, good to be with you guys. You know, as Eric said, I've been on several times talking all kind of stuff, and this is something that not sure I'm enjoying what we're going to talk about, but it's got to be discussed. So let's get into it, and I'm happy to be here with you guys.
Before we do jump a little further, I just want to plug some of our sponsors. Obviously, Turquoise Desert Tap Room. They've got some more promos coming out later this week. They're running a Friday night special. On Friday nights, they're giving 15% off for fans that want to come in wearing their Pride school colors. So anyone kind of in the Bernalillo, Rio Rancho area, wear your Cleveland Storm, your Rio Rancho Ram, or your Bernalillo Sarton gear and get 15% off. Obvious, and then again, Affordable Solar. They're local solar company. I've actually just recently transitioned to solar, easy company to work with. Neil's great, part owner there. And we'll jump into it. So Coach, with the recent announcement, which kind of sucked the air out of the room especially for us diehard basketball fans. What was your initial reaction to the news breaking that the Pac-6 or the Pac-2 were plucking four of the big time programs from the Mountain West?
Well, I mean, the first thing, it's a gut punch, and I remember like last summer when San Diego State pulled that whole we're pulling out, and then they kind of had to backtrack because the Pac said, well, hold on, because they were about to implode, and it kind of backfired on San Diego State and blew up in their face. Like, internally, me and I'm sure everybody else was like pumping their fists, like, yes, we held the band together, right? Now in hindsight, we cut off our nose despite our face there. Like, would have rather had San Diego State leave, as good a program as they are, to keep the rest of the league together. Because the fact is now that the four have been plucked. I know Fresno State's been bad for a long time in hoops, but you're taking two of the top handful of programs and three really with Colorado State that are gone. And, I'm sure we'll get into some of the other prospective moves in a little bit, but it's crippling. It's like you're bisecting the league, you're cutting it in half, and it will never be the same. And as you said, like, unfortunately, things are driven by football, and that's why this is happening. But in the Mountain West, like, it's diehard basketball. That's one of the reasons why I'm so into it from here on the East Coast, because I love the passionate fan bases where you guys are, and in Logan, Utah, and in Fort Collins and Reno and all the other places. And so it's never going to be the same. A lot of things to be sorted out yet, but it's not a good update. And that's pretty much like the feeling for a lot of us, I'm sure.
Rick, I'm going to throw this one over to you because I know, well, you're in California. Obviously, San Diego State's kind of a big prominent school there, especially in the basketball and even on the national scene. But for the last several years, they've been pretty public about wanting to get out of the Mountain West and go east into the Big 12. This to me seems like they're almost celebrating it like it's much bigger than what it is. I mean, what is your thoughts? Because I necessarily don't think that the Pac-6 are as much or anything really better than another mid-major conference at this point.
Right, and like you're hitting on, it seems like San Diego State and Boise, to that matter, have acted like they've been too good for this league for years, and that they've deserved to be treated differently and play under different rules than everyone else in the conference. So they finally got their wish. It seems like these four schools and their athletic directors were all lying to our faces for the last few months about plans to move out of the conference. Initially, my thoughts are, just the effect on basketball. You're losing 3 NCAA tournament teams, but like you're saying, what are they really going to right now? All they're really going to, in my opinion, is the brand name of the conference. Now, it's not a strong conference in basketball, obviously, even if they round it out, maybe with the likes of a Memphis or another team. I still don't know if they'll be getting automatic bid in football for that matter either. So it's confusing, but then for the teams that are left behind in the Mountain West, we know there's going to be a second wave coming where they look to scoop up some other teams, and it's still waiting on our fingers, like who are they going to get next? Who's going to be added, and what's really going to be left for the Mountain West? Because there's really a few different options that the Mountain West can go in at this point. They're going to have a lot of money after all this buyout. So can they attract some new teams, and what will the conference really look like moving forward? And for me, what I'm really thinking about, and you guys can share your thoughts if you have any, what do the next 2 years really look like in terms of recruiting, retaining coaches, fans showing up? Is there, kind of like the last 2 years, people act like it's the end of the world and there's huge crowds, or are people going to kind of turn their nose up at it because they're tired of having to go through all of this? And then the long-term effects for schools like UNM, if they don't make it to a big conference, what does that really mean if they have to step down a level? Does the fans still continue to support like they do, or does that kind of taper down too? So I don't know, Nick, if you have any further thoughts than that, but I'm sure you have some different ones than I.
Yeah, no, I kind of wanted to bounce an idea off Coach Moser and recap last year when the Pac-12 kind of broke up and we found out that all these teams were going to different conferences. It was just a domino effect. Like, you heard about UCLA, you heard about USC. Some people went to the Big 12, some people went to the ACC. What do you think the next month looks like for the Mountain West in terms of do you think more teams are going to leave? We've obviously heard about Air Force being a candidate for the AAC for a number of reasons. But what do you think the next month looks like for the Mountain West? Do you see any other teams possibly leaving? Do you see them grabbing a few teams to come in? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so here's the thing is, if they wanted, they being the Pac-2, 6, whatever you want to call them, if the Pac wanted any other Mountain West teams, like really wanted them, they would have taken them right away. You have to believe that, right? They're paying quite a hefty fee here to the Mountain West, as you guys talked about. So, and that's probably a reason why they didn't grab UNLV. A lot of people were surprised UNLV didn't make the first cut. They probably are in like maybe the second cut, but because of financial reasons, it's cheaper for the Pac to go poach from the AAC. So just earlier, I was reading a report. It looks like Memphis and Tulane may be the next two to be grabbed to get to 7 and 8 for the conference for football. I don't know, there's some talk about some of the other schools over there, whether it's UTSA, South Florida, Texas State, people throw around these names. So I think it's possible that it gets back to UNLV. Maybe there was some legitimacy to that report that they're kind of tied to Nevada, and some people within the state there don't want them to separate because you have to believe that the Pac does not want Nevada, Utah State, New Mexico. And again, like we're looking at it from a basketball perspective. They're looking at it from a football perspective. Okay. Now, Nevada and New Mexico have new coaches, and they seem to be punching above their weight so far here in the early season, but they're way down the totem pole right now in football in terms of a lot of things compared to the other programs. Okay. And so I have to believe that maybe UNLV later on, especially the Vegas market helps, but I think the rest of it, and you mentioned Nick, Air Force, I think they're probably gone. Like it makes sense for them to be in a conference with Navy and with Army, and especially now that the Mountain West seems to be kind of fractured a little bit. Then it becomes like, who are they going to backfill with? Because they have all this money. And, I'll just say a couple of things and then I'll let you guys get back in here. I've seen some people online upset that the commissioner wasn't more proactive to keep this thing together. Look, I don't think that's the right way to look at this. Like, A, who are they going to go after that was going to solidify it and make it more attractive to a TV partner? And B, as you said right at the top, Ricky, Boise State and San Diego State have been looking to get out for years and years and years. So it doesn't matter like if the Mountain West was proactive or not. The Pac-2 comes calling and they're gone. Even though, as you pointed out, and I tweeted it out, and I firmly believe it, right now it's a lateral move. Okay. The only thing to me that can change that is if the school from the Pacific Northwest joins that Pac-2 and Gonzaga. If the Zags join, then fine. Like you guys made a better choice. Good for you. Happy for you. That's great. If the Zags don't join, and I'd say it's probably 50-50, maybe even less at this point that they do, then they just went for the name and maybe a couple million more per year. That's my view on it. Maybe that will change down the road, but that's what I believe now. The Mountain West probably is not going to dissolve because they have so much money that they're going to bring in from the Pac. It's just a matter of, do they want to bring in football schools like the Dakotas and the Montanas, or do they want to take established like UTEP, New Mexico State type of programs that have a better basketball tradition, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, you make a good point, Coach. But I want to stay on that topic with the Gonzaga, which has kind of been thrown around, right? Which is they don't have football. And it's predominantly basketball, and that's it. So when you consider that the only thing on the agenda right now with conference realignment has been football, basketball has kind of been an afterthought, right? So that's the part that sucks about it for other basketball predominant schools and universities like UNM. But when you start throwing around the names like Gonzaga and that joining a conference, that obviously holds some weight, right? But in the basketball realm of things. Now, if the Pac-12 were to at least change the way that they're thinking about it and try to develop some type of heavy basketball, then you start to drive some more value on the basketball side of things. And I think you could actually draw some attention of some of those TV networks, right? So I'm going to pose this question to Nick because he's the one that works in TV with ProView and some of the big schools in Albuquerque, right? Like when those big time matchups are in town, you want to be on the call for that game. That's going to draw the viewership. That's going to draw the value. What do you think about of like a basketball specific change in agenda with conference alignment and maybe the Pac-12 kind of taking a stab on it and adding a school like UNM with Gonzaga? Obviously, real theoretically, and I'm just speculating here, but what are your thoughts around that?
No, I think basketball can sometimes be a lot more attractive to watch on TV than football. I mean, you can watch it at different times during the week. College football, Saturday, you got some games sprinkled throughout the week sometimes, but I think it would be super attractive for a conference like that to attract a basketball-centric school like Gonzaga, just because I think it will bring revenue. There's more opportunities. There's more games. College football, it's 10 to 14 games per year. College basketball, you've got over 30, plus you've got the NCAA tournament. So, no, when you look at it from that perspective, I think it would make sense to add a team like Gonzaga for sure.
Yeah, and then I'm going to kick this one over. Go ahead, Rick. Go ahead.
I was going to say, with all that money that the Mountain West has, and with all the TV networks, even Hulu, Netflix, all the streaming networks, they want live sports. That's the content they want. And late in the evening, there's still going to be a market for sports, whether it's the Mountain West or whatever the new conferences are that come out of this. People on the East Coast still wait up and watch football after dark or whatever they want to call it. So there is going to be a market for the Mountain West or whatever is left behind. So there will be a media deal coming for that, I would think. And then the one thing I just wanted to hit on with the thought about Gonzaga and New Mexico, a lot of people I've heard on the Albuquerque radio and on Twitter throwing out the idea of UNM dropping their football program and becoming a Gonzaga-like school. In my eyes, that would never work. How many Gonzagas are there really out there? The only comparables, I guess, are St. Mary's and maybe Villanova, who I think has FCS football. And if you take away the football program, that totally changes the budget for the athletic departments and probably alters how basketball looks. So I don't think that model would be good for UNM either. But that is exciting to hear that Gonzaga would be a potential entrant to that conference.
With how attractive that is, and Tom, I'm going to kick this one over to you because you're the probably the most objective Mountain West fan here because we're all Lobos over here. But when you consider something like that, a power basketball conference or just something out west, you think of the show at San Diego State, you think about the herd at Utah State, even CSU with their fans and student base, and then obviously the iconic pit. Talk about value and watchability and the East Coast and the rest of the country being able to tune in to something that exciting and getting a glimpse at what and how exciting those games are.
Well, yeah, I mean, you saw it last year, right? Like on Twitter. Now, of course, they're going to promote their own product, but the CBS Sportsnet announcers in the booth and in the studio, they could not stop raving about the games last year. Now, many of them were very good, and as you mentioned, they're in raucous arenas. They're contested between two very good teams. Most of the time, they ended up competitive with some great players, coaches, and teams. And it is a good show. And with the Pac-12 now kind of, well, for the next couple of years, like gone, there is a window for that. And people do want to see it, and especially, I mean, the late night games, right? I don't know. Those people get paid the money to make those decisions. Why it's not as attractive as, as Nick pointed out, you can have those games on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday every week, as opposed to just, a game Thursday, a game Friday on Saturday, like football. Why it isn't more attractive. I don't understand that, but like that's just the advertisers prefer that. I guess, football does draw more ratings. It's disappointing. I do think that it's a great brand. Obviously, we all know that. And, it is disappointing that basketball doesn't get more of an equal cut in this, because then some of these decisions would not be happening the way that football is 99% responsible for these decisions.
Yeah, I think the one thing that stands out the most to all of us is what we're going to miss out on with the rivalries, because I felt like every game, and even in the Mountain West tournament, like that was probably one of the most entertaining tournaments that we've seen in the history of the Mountain West, with how deep the league is and how these schools interacted and the fan bases interacted. But changing gears here a little bit, I want to kick this over to Rick, because Rick did touch on it with being able to retain coaches and being able to recruit and retain players. Obviously, there's the transfer portal, and Coach Pitino obviously tried to get poached once before. It's going to continue to happen. Coaches are going to get plucked from the mid majors, the G5s, and go up to the big boy leagues and try to get a much bigger school that has deeper pockets. Rick, what are your thoughts there about just kind of what I just covered?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be surprising when these coaches that are left over in the Mountain West do get offers and probably do leave, and you're not going to blame them, right? They didn't come in to these jobs to be in a lesser conference. And if, you just look at, Colorado State, and some people are wondering, well, why did they get picked to go? Well, you look at the investment that they put into their football facilities. They pay both their football and basketball coaches, Medved and Norvell, over $1 million each. So when, they're being analyzed and they see the overall investment in the athletic department, that goes a long way. And when you look 400 miles south at UNM, you don't see that same investment. And, I really thought recruiting might be affected, but the Lobos picked up Isaac Williamson, a recruit from LA today. So I guess he doesn't care what the hell conference they're in. He just wants to be a Lobo. So there might still be some kids like that where they're just going to be loyal to a school that's been recruiting them already, and they don't really care what the conference is. They're just happy to get that scholarship and NIL money. So it could change, or it could not. I think it depends about the resources that these leftover schools continue to get in their NIL budgets.
Nick?
Yeah,
do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, no, I'll just add a little bit to that. I mean, I think it's kind of hard to project, for example, what's Richard Pitino going to do? I mean, he flirted with Louisville in the offseason last year. Some of us thought he was going to leave. There's still time for the Mountain West to add a conference to continue to remain competitive. So I think it's kind of hard to speculate and say, well, this guy's going to leave, that guy's going to leave. It's likely that they're going to leave. I mean, a lot can happen between now and then. I know on this show we've talked about when it comes to Coach Pitino, now that Eddie Nunez has left, he has a provision in his contract, which I think it's half the buyout now, half of what it was going to be. So I'm not sure what other coaches around the Mountain West have some similar language in their contract like that. But, that could make it easier for a school to come in, and for the remaining years on the contract, the buyout's half. It's a little easier. As far as recruiting goes, I mean, schools like UNM, and I know we're biased here because we're Lobo fans, but we have something to offer that a lot of programs across the country don't have. And that's the pit, and that's the atmosphere, and that's how much this community invests in Lobo basketball. We have a pretty solid NIL collective when it comes to the Mountain West. We've got a great environment, great fan support. And so I think UNM, I can't speak to any other Mountain West programs that are still remaining after 2026, but I think UNM still has a lot to sell when it comes to basketball, for sure.
Yeah, I do. I agree with all of that. Focusing more on this upcoming season, Coach, I don't know how much you've been following with the offseason moves, some of the additions. Obviously, there's a lot of high hopes for the Mountain West to potentially get another 5 or 6 teams into the NCAA tournament. What's your outlook for the year look like, and who are some players that you're looking to either make that jump into stardom?
Well, I mean, it's funny. Like, we talked off air a little bit here that I'm about to kick it in with my podcast and restart, for a second season. I haven't done it yet for some other reasons, but I've thought in my mind, I've run it over 10 different times, like how I would rank them in a preseason. And it's just so tough because really the top 7 teams that we saw last year, if you count UNLV as 7 because of the talent they had, like you could ask 10 different people and get 10 different orders because New Mexico and Boise State were really hurt by the departures, the kind of late departures of Toppin and Abo. Had those two remained, like those two are head and shoulders above the rest of the league, without a doubt. Okay. So you take away probably the best player on each of those teams, and they're gonna fall down a little bit. Now, the Lobos have some players to fill in for sure, and Boise State does too. So I think you'll probably see those two schools at the top of most lists in the preseason. San Diego State, I'm not sure. They lost a lot, and they struggled on the road last year. They couldn't win a road game against a good team. Now they're breaking in almost an entirely new lineup, which happens more these days during the transfer portal era for sure. And obviously I trust Dutcher probably more than almost any other coach in the conference. But I don't know that they're at that level yet. They may get better, and they may end up advancing the furthest in the NCAA tournament. But for league purposes, I don't know that I would put them in the top 2 or 3 right now. So, certainly there's some impact transfers. Like Kobe Sanders at Nevada is going to be expected to have an impact for the Wolfpack to keep them near the top. Colorado State brought in quite a few transfers. I like the interconference transfer, which is going to help Boise State with Cardanius going there to run the point, because he's what they were missing last year, and he's a true point guard. Like, he's not the flashy guy that's going to wow you, but he's a winner. He knows how to play, and I think he'll be a good fit for Leon Rice's system. But New Mexico obviously probably. If it's not Deion Thomas, if hearing from UNLV people, probably has the best player in the conference in Donovan Dent. Hopefully he can knock a few more jump shots down this year, and then he'll be unguardable. But he's such a great playmaker, and the Lobos have some depth, hopefully, as long as they stay healthy. There's so many teams, and I didn't even mention Utah State because they lost their coach and they lost a couple that are good players, but Ian Martinez, he's a first team all conference guy just waiting he's a stud. They got some other Falslev is back. Isaac Johnson's back to 7-footer. So I wouldn't discount them either. And there's just so many good storylines. It's a shame that this has kind of overtaken it, but once we get past it and we're in the season, it's going to be just as exciting as last year.
Yeah, I think one of those players that you didn't mention was Nick Boyd, transferring to San Diego State, who played at FIU, played against San Diego State in the Final Four the year that they made that run. But yeah, I think there's a lot of incoming transfers. Nick, Rick, do you guys have any other Mountain West basketball news you guys want to cover with Coach before we let him go? No, it's late in his time zone.
This Coach, I want to know, do you recruit other East Coasters to watch the Mountain West? Do you tell your buddies to tune in?
What's funny, really quick, because I know you guys want to talk some Lobo football. I help out running a high school outdoor tournament in the summer, end of July. It's like one of the biggest outdoor tournaments because everybody plays inside. So there's about 64 high school teams there from the greater Lehigh Valley area and Eastern Pennsylvania. We get teams from all over Pennsylvania, New York, all that stuff. So you wouldn't believe how many people started talking to me about the pod. Now, I still stay in touch with some of those people a little bit, but there were some that I fringe talked to here and there. And they're like, oh, Mountain West. And I'm like, you guys are listening. And they're like, yeah, we love it. And then, like you said, because of that, they follow the league now. Oh, man, it's a great league. Well, yeah, of course it is. So I have gotten people involved in watching the league. Now the fact is they may have started watching it and following it because of me, but if it wasn't a good product, they wouldn't stick around. Like, it's a great product. As you guys know, you can watch it 4 nights a week and get great games 90% of the time with the fans and the players and the coaches. So, yeah, it's funny, but I love it. And that's why I continue to do it. So,
Coach, I just had one question for you. Eric hit on it earlier in the show, and then you had a tweet when the news broke about 4 days ago about some of the rivalries that we're going to miss out in Mountain West basketball. With the 2 seasons left that we have of these teams intact, this might be a tough question on the spot, but what are your kind of top 3 games in the specific venue arena that you would want to see that we're not going to get to see after the next couple seasons?
All right, that's a great question, Nick. I mean, I think for one, you have to say the San Diego State, New Mexico game. You guys have been there. Now, last year, neither game was really competitive in the second half, but the intensity was there, and both teams got a big win, right? I think if you look north, Boise State and Utah State have a heck of a rivalry. That's pretty close geographically there. People from my neck of the woods don't think of that, like Boise and Utah State, but that's a drivable game. And those two, like, they don't like no love lost there. They get after it. And so that's going to be a shame. This one probably doesn't get as much buzz, and they may continue in non-conference, but if you don't continue the border war between Colorado State and Wyoming, that's a shame. I mean, that's a great rivalry out there for a century. And then it's not official yet, but if UNLV leaves, like, it'll be a shame for UNLV and Nevada to not go back and forth. Obviously, I should mention, honorable mention with you guys, because of the personal connection with Alford. The games with Nevada and New Mexico the last 2 years have been lights out. I can't wait for those games again. We've seen buzzer beaters. We've seen Blackshear hitting the rim and the ball bounce around for 6 seconds until it goes in. We've seen double overtime. We've seen ref shows in your games. I mean, they're fantastic. So how can I leave that one off? Because those games have been must-see TV.
Right on, Coach. We always appreciate having you on. And then if you can, I guess just give our viewers, our listeners, how do they find you? How do they find your podcast? When are you looking to kind of kick things up again?
Sure. Absolutely, Eric. So you can find me on Twitter at Coach Moser at COAC. Jesus, Coach MOSSER. Man, I was terrible. I'm not really that slow. I actually used to be good sponge. So Coach Moser, MOSSER on Twitter. My podcast is called Top of the Mountain West, and it's on Spotify. I believe this year I'm going to expand it to get onto Apple as well. I'm I would think in the next week, going to release the first episode because, again, a lot of stuff to talk about, and we're getting close to practice starting here, official practice. So want to get out there and get some thoughts out, some feelings, and get some guests on so I can talk some hoops and really get the juices flowing. So look for that in the next week or so, but I'll have all the updates out on Twitter. And Eric, Ricky, Nick, thanks so much for having me. Love chatting it up with you guys. Enjoy your football conversation, and hopefully we can talk soon.
Yeah, we'll bug you down the road, and maybe we could do some Mountain West preview and really go in depth on some of the rosters and kind of around the Mountain West. So thanks again for coming on, Tom. Always appreciate your time.
You got it. Good night, guys. See ya.
Let him cook. Let him cook now. Let him cook. I said let him cook.
Man, I always appreciate Coach Moser coming on. He's just like a wealth of knowledge, and he knows the game really close. And I'm glad he follows it from like way out East Coast. I don't know exactly where he's from. I know Ryan does, but he follows it as close as we do. But he's locked into pretty much every game, and I can really appreciate all that. So, you guys have any last thoughts on Lobo hoops before we kind of move on to football and some recent Lobo commit news?
Yeah, just I think Coach Moser's from Delaware, if I remember correctly, and he said he's getting his juices flowing. He got my juices flowing talking about basketball there at the end. So always glad to have him on, and I'll just hop right into the commit news, Eric, if that's okay, since we're talking b-ball.
Go for it. Yep, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, Lobo's got a 3-star commit out of the 2025 class, that being Isaac Williamson, and that's with 2 S's and 1 A. He's a 6'1" point guard, listed at 165 pounds. He's from the LA area, played at Eleanor Roosevelt High School, and also notably for the Compton Magic AAU team, who's a really notable AAU team there in the LA area. I think it's backed by some NBA players. This guy's really known for his defensive prowess. He won Defensive Player of the Year in his conference last year as a junior, averaging 12 points and 1.6 steals. He's quoted by other coaches as saying he's just a defensive disruptor out there on the court. But from the film I watched, which Eric has us watching here, this guy can also shoot the ball. We see him hitting the 3 with ease here. Can also put the ball on the floor. So to me, looks, we don't know if he has the same type of heart and determination as a Jalen House, but a defensive-minded guard who's going to get on the floor and mix it up, and then also is able to put the ball in the hole on the other end. So really got to like this. They'll probably pair him in the backcourt for the next few years with Mr. K. Dodson. So very exciting recruiting news. Other recent Lobo guys, recruits they're looking at for 2025 include Jaden Leverett, Winters Grady, Jasir Redcher from out here in the Bay Area. He was in Albuquerque last week, along with Jalen Petty and Quentin Rhymes. So more than enough young guys to fill out this roster. So pretty exciting news to get Isaac Williamson here today.
Before we move into more of a football-focused topic, I do want to pose a question of the night. I didn't really prep you guys for it, but anyone that's tuning in, you guys are more than welcome to join and answer the question as you see fit. But question of the night is, where do you see UNM fitting in after all this shakes out? Do you see them fitting in or staying in the Mountain West? Do you see them potentially trying to join the Pac-12? Do you see them doing something else? So maybe give that some thought, and we can address that question towards the end of the show. So I'll bring it up a couple more times, but on to the next topic. Nick, you were the one that's kind of plugged more into the high school football scene. Recent state rankings were just released. Do you kind of want to just go down and what you've been able to see, what you've been following? Obviously, we see La Cueva, who's been kind of top of the rankings for a really long time now. I don't really see them moving any further down, but what's your take on high school football around the state?
Yeah, I know. I'll start in class 6A. You see, football classifications all the way 6A through 6-man, but in 6A, La Cueva's just been on a roll. I mean, they're 3-0. They had a big win over Pinnacle, Arizona that we talked about a couple weeks ago. They recently played Sandia on Friday of last week in the My 50 Game of the Week, broadcasted by ProView Networks, and they won 42-19. Cam Dyer, who we had on Road to the Pit earlier this summer, the Arizona State commit at the wide receiver position, still playing quarterback for the Bears. I think 293 yards passing in the first 2 quarters of play. La Cueva running back Cheeto Lambrera III, 175 yards rushing, 4 rushing touchdowns. So La Cueva kicking on all cylinders right now. Second, Centennial, 4-0. They just had a big win over Rio Rancho, 49-27. The Hawks are for real. I haven't seen them in person. I've only read about them and seen some highlights. Their quarterback, Zayden Davis, has committed to New Mexico State University. They're obviously going to duke it out with Las Cruces, who you see ranked at number 5. Las Cruces and Cleveland just had a dogfight down in Las Cruces down south. Cleveland came out on top. It was a close game in the second half. The Storm looked good as they've won 3 in a row now, and I think they're going to be pretty strong there at 3. One game to watch this weekend, ProView Networks, Saturday morning, 11 a.m. I'll be on the call. It's Volcano Vista, your number 4 team. They'll be taking on El Dorado, who's 2-1. That'll be a non-district game. So that's your Class 6A. I'll go quickly through Class 5A and Class 4A. I think obviously the team to watch in Class 5A is going to be the Lovington Wildcats. 4-0 on the season. They just beat Roswell at Brian Urlacher Field this last weekend, 35-21. The Wildcats are for real. They're coming up from Class 4A last year. They were your 4A class or Class 4A state champions last year. They beat Portales. They have just beat everything that's been in their way. They beat Hobbs. They beat Roswell just this last weekend. So they're the team to beat in Class 5A. Artesia's getting their footing back. They just won this past weekend. Roswell just lost to Lovington. So those are your top 3 teams. Class 4A, Bernalillo, man, they're 4-0. They just destroyed Moriarty. I think it was 42-0. Espanola Valley just beat Grant this last weekend. They're a surprising 4-0. They were a playoff team last year. They won in the opening round over St. Pius. They got a few guys back. Portales, that's your number 3 team in Class 4A. Their quarterback, Paxton Culpepper, has been hurt. They go as he goes. So if he's going to be healthy these next couple of weeks, I think Portales can kind of shake it out. St. Mike's is your number 1 team in Class 3A. They just played against Albuquerque Academy this last weekend on Saturday. I may be getting the score wrong. I think they beat Academy 42-7. St. Mike's has always been a strong program in the 3A class. So I think them and Robertson, who were in the state championship last year in Class 3A, St. Mike's won it last year. I think those are your top teams. I've seen too much of Class 2A football other than Albuquerque Metro's Legacy Academy, who you see come in ranked at number 5. They just won this last weekend. They had a big win over Hope Christian a couple weeks ago. So I think that's your team to look at in Class 2A. Can't really say I've seen a lot of 8-man football. You don't see a lot of metro area teams there. One story to watch, though, is Gateway Christian, the number 3 team. Their Gateway Christian's coming up from 6-man football last year. They were in the 6-man football championship against Roy Mascaro, who's your number 1 team in Class 6-man. So that's kind of what it looks like for high school football as far as a recap of last week. Quickly looking at ProView Network's schedule coming up this week. Thursday football, it's going to be Clovis at Cibola. Catch that on Game Vision or Comcast Channel 26. ProView Networks will also have the Santa Fe Demons and the Sandia Matadors. That game being played on Thursday at 7 p.m. The My 50 game of the week is on Friday. That'll be Farmington taking on La Cueva. Farmington's got a pretty strong squad. Last week, not this past week, but the week before, they had a dogfight with Los Lunas, lost 37-28. So that'll be the district opener for La Cueva and for Farmington. Rio Rancho has a team from El Paso coming in. They're playing on Friday at home. They're taking on East Lake, El Paso. Catch that on the NFHS Network or Comcast Channel 26. Another game down in Los Lunas, which I will have. It'll be West Mesa and Los Lunas. A district opener for both of those teams. Had West Mesa earlier in the year. Their first game of the season, they beat St. Pius. They beat Mayfield. Just this last week, they lost to Volcano Vista. So the Mustangs looking to rebound. Los Lunas did beat El Dorado last week, 14-6. So Saturday, I already talked about it, Volcano Vista and El Dorado. That is 11 a.m. on Game Vision. We'll also have Mayamura and Valley, 1 p.m. on Game Vision. And then Portales versus Monzano, 4 p.m. on Game Vision. I believe Volcano Vista and El Dorado, that'll be at Wilson Stadium for folks in Albuquerque that are wanting to check out a local high school game. Volcano Vista, El Dorado, 11 a.m. at Wilson Stadium. I'm not too sure about Mayamura and Valley and Portales and Monzano, but I may be able to get that information tomorrow. So That's what high school football looks like so far these first few weeks, Eric.
But here's the real question. Here's the real question, Nick. Can you tell me what 6-man football looks like?
Man, so the very first game that I ever announced was the 6-man championship with Gateway Christian and Mountaineer. It's weird, man. And you coming from Pius, being a 2-time All-State lineman, playing with 11 guys on the field, the formations are so different. I don't know the exact.
How many
rule.
linemen are there?
I think you have to have. Oh man, I know I'm getting this wrong. I want to say you have to have 3 down linemen, but one of them has to specifically be on the line of scrimmage, and the other 2 can line up in a certain place. But you'll see some weird formations where it'll just be one guy snapping the ball. It'll be a shotgun. They'll have like a halfback. They'll have 2 guys real far away. I mean,
kind of like the Lobos field goal unit.
Sort of, in a way, yeah, exactly. Like when they got called on that penalty. So 6-man. Okay. It's got some weird rules like. When they play on an 80-yard field too. It's a smaller field, obviously. That makes sense. There's a lot of other weird rules that I have to learn usually when I call those games or right before. But it's interesting to watch. 8-man football too. It's a little different. They got 3 guys on the line of scrimmage for sure. I think 6-man. Now that I think about it, you only need 1 guy on the line of scrimmage, and that's the guy snapping the ball. So it's different. It's different for sure.
So you're not going to get any illegal man downfield penalties like we saw all weekend with the NFL.
Yeah, right. Or with the Lobos, like we were talking about on our group text. No, I can't say in the 2 6-man games that I've seen that I saw a lot of those penalties. No.
Yeah. And then one last question, Nick, and I could be wrong here, but Centennial in 6A, they beat both Rio Rancho schools, right? Cleveland and Rio Rancho, like they are legit, the real deal.
They did, yeah. No, you're right. No, that was the first game of the season for Centennial in Cleveland, and yeah, they went into Rio Rancho to Cleveland's home turf and just took care of business. And yeah, they also beat Rio Rancho, so they are for real. I haven't looked at their schedule to see if they have any more Albuquerque metro area teams on their schedule. They're always competitive. Their coach, Aaron Ocampo, he's been interviewed by the NMAA, talked about, what his team looks like. So Centennial Hawks are for real this year. That's for sure.
Right on. Thanks for the rundown, man. I need to pay closer attention to high school football, where actually your guys' show, the Road to the Pit, which we're looking at kind of renaming or rebranding to cover all sports, because it's not every state championship's going to be played in the pit, but you guys are covering it from all angles and doing a great job. So I think you guys have a guest coming on tomorrow night, if I'm not mistaken, right? A volleyball coach.
No, it's a girls soccer's coach, Amy Fankum. So tune in tomorrow, 7 p.m. I think is when we're going to start. And we'll promote the show hopefully. But yeah, Amy Fankum, girls soccer coach for Hope Christian, 3-time state champion head coach. She was an All-American when she played at La Cueva back in from 1997 through 2000. She was an All-American when she played at Notre Dame. We're very lucky to have her on. Albuquerque's very lucky to have her. And we're looking forward to breaking down girls soccer with her tomorrow.
Okay. 7 p.m. tomorrow night. We'll get you on. Next, Lobo football. Rick, what's your breakdown? We all watched the game. What was your takeaway?
Wow. As Coach Mendenhall would say, gosh. He says gosh a lot is what I've noticed in the press conference. So gosh. First takeaway, it was only 31-19 with 4 minutes to go in the third quarter, believe it or not. So the Lobos were only down 12 points with 4 minutes to go. The bright spots, let's start with the good first. We saw some other guys out there making plays finally as receivers. Some big catches by Caleb Medford, highlight reel catch on the sideline there with the toe tap. That was a thing of beauty. Nick Trujillo also made some big catches, but we know who the biggest dog is on this team, and none other than Luke Wysong. He's by far the most consistent player so far. He just continues to make huge plays. That play where he went for a ride in the air, I thought he must have broken 2 or 3 ribs, and God bless him. It looks like he only got the air knocked out of him and he continued to play. 281 yards receiving for him so far this year. Just time after time, you can go to Mr. Wysong. On the O-line, Mackenzie Agnello has actually been playing really well at center ever since he got moved there, and it was actually graded by PFF as one of the better centers in the West this week. On defense, it's hard to find too many bright spots, but Noah Avenger back there, transfer from San Diego State, 29 total tackles so far this year. He and Christian Ellis have been the two playmakers primarily in the secondary. Devin Dampier had to throw the ball 44 times this week. And in my mind, that's way too much because they were running the ball effectively. But for some reason, they declined to run the ball more than about 10 times a game through the running backs right now. And I think when they get into games like they're going to move into here where they're mismatched against a team like Fresno, they need to try to control the clock, and that's done through running the football. If you're asking Dampier to throw 40 to 50 times a game, I don't think that's sustainable to win games in this conference. They have running backs that have shown they're able to carry the load, and they have 2 or 3 of them, including Nakari Rogers, who's picked up a few touchdowns easily this year. So I think they have the weapons in the backfield, but for some reason they're not choosing to run the ball through their running backs that much, and that kind of just hurts them on a spot in third down where they were 4 for 13, which is terrible, and they had to settle for those field goals on those early drives, right? Because they're getting themselves in second and third and long situations where it's 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 6. It's not third and a manageable. And they had to settle early on. And then in the second half, they just didn't convert at all. And, we were just hitting on it, talking about 6-man football, but 112 yards of penalties on 16 flags. We were promised a team that was going to be more disciplined than the team last year that led the nation in penalties. The last 2 games, we have not seen it. And, I know penalties are going to happen through the course of the game, but there's been a lot of offsides, calls on punts, field goals, just things in my mind that are avoidable and, would be nice to eliminate. So I'm just looking forward here. We got Fresno. I'll let you guys hop in here, but Fresno is on a roll here after smashing New Mexico State last week. Mikey Keene is leading the way so far, averaging 271 yards, 5 TDs and 4 picks. I think that's also what Dampier has. So similar numbers there. Top receiver is Mac Delana, 15 catches for 384, and running back Malik Sherrod is leading the way. So it doesn't really get any easier for New Mexico this week in my eyes. They're still going up against a superior opponent with more talented players. And, the Lobos giving up nearly 600 yards a game, regardless of what they do on offense, it's going to be hard to stay in those games. What are you guys thinking here moving into conference play?
Well, specifically going into Fresno, I feel like they've matched up with Auburn, with Arizona, and they've shown the ability to score and to score quickly and definitely get the ball moving, especially when you get Dampier outside of the pocket with the play action. They're very capable. It's just in the second half is where I think they just start to wear a little bit and start missing some assignments and giving up some of those bigger plays. And that's where you see some of these more experienced and much deeper teams at each position kind of take control of the game, right? They're bigger players, they're stronger, they're more conditioned, and they're just deeper. They're 3 deep at each position where UNM is playing their best, but they might go 1 or if that maybe 2 deep at some positions. But they've shown the ability to move the ball downfield. I think the offensive coordinator, Coach Beck, is doing a really good job. I think they're opening a lot of eyes come Mountain West play, where I feel like the talent and the skill from the Mountain West might regress a little bit. So the Lobos might shock some people coming down the road. I think the latest ESPN projections have UNM winning 4 games this year, and primarily in the Mountain West Conference. Wyoming's not looking as strong. Air Force isn't looking as strong. Fresno does look like top tier in the conference. They just came off of a win. I think they won 45-46, or maybe it was 49-0 against New Mexico State, where New Mexico State saw their starting quarterback go down with a broken collar, and Hogan, he's out for the year. But I'm optimistic, man. I don't like to look at things from a pessimistic point of view, but with what I've seen UNM do on the road at Arizona, on the road at Auburn, two really good, big program, right? Big Power 5 conferences or Power 4 conferences. I like what I see. Now it's just about consistently doing it, right? I'm kind of stealing Mendenhall's words there, but that's kind of my take on it. I'm impressed with the running game and impressed with the receivers, especially Wysong, man. Wysong's definitely a dog, and he is a leader for a reason.
For sure. I'll just kind of piggyback off some of the things that you said, Eric, and also you, Rick. I mean, if you were to tell me at the beginning of the season that we would go into Arizona, it would be a one-score game at halftime, and then a week later we'd go into Auburn and it'd be a one-score game at halftime, I would have said no way. Absolutely not. We were going to get killed. There's been some encouraging things. You guys have already hit on it. The offense clicks on all cylinders. It goes through Devin Dampier. We've talked about him a ton. I mean, he gives them a chance. You know, he doesn't get sacked a lot, not necessarily because the protection is all that great all the time, but because he's so elusive and he can extend plays and he keeps his eyes downfield. I mean, look at these highlights that we have up. I mean, how many times has he gone outside the pocket and found somebody? I mean, one that comes up to me off the top of my head is when Nick Trujillo drew that pass interference. It required Dampier to flush out of the pocket, find somebody downfield, and he extends plays. So as long as he's healthy, I think offensively they have a chance to be productive. Defensively, Coach Mendenhall talked about this in the press conference on Monday. He said, the margins are so thin, the margin for error. And we saw that again on Saturday at Auburn. I mean, Auburn starts out with the ball. It's 17-13 at halftime, right? And then Auburn gets the first possession. They go 10 plays, 75 yards, 5 minutes, 2 seconds, and they score. It's 24-13. UNM marches down the field, 9 plays, 50 yards on 4th and 5 from the Auburn 25. I think it's Dampier throws an interception. And so very similar to the Arizona game where Arizona scores early in the second half as Quali Conley on that long 51-yard touchdown run, and then UNM gets the ball. I think it was a pass was thrown to Sean Miller. It went off his hands. It was intercepted, and then that was kind of the ball game. So when you're playing against teams like Arizona, who was ranked at the time that we played them on the road, Auburn, who's not ranked, and I don't even know if they're top-tier SEC team right now, but it's still early. The margins are so thin. One mistake will set you back. Rick, I think you're right. Fresno State is cream of the crop when it comes to the Mountain West. I still think there are advantages to playing at home. I mean, think about it. UNM this weekend, they had to have their flight diverted to Mobile, Alabama, and they had to get bussed in with South Alabama buses. You don't got to deal with that when you're playing at home. There's advantages to playing at home. It's going to be an uphill battle. Coach Mendenhall said it. If anybody thinks that, the light's just going to turn on automatically because we're starting conference play, this is going to be our turning point, and they expect us to just start winning, it's not going to happen just like that, the way people want. I mean, maybe it will. But I think for Lobo fans, we just got to be patient. This sounds cliche. This is coach speak, but we got to trust the process, trust in the coaching staff and take these improvements as we see them for sure.
Yeah, I think I want to highlight just a few different things because I was listening to the Lobo talk that was happening actually right before we kicked this thing off at 8:00. It was at Sandia Sports Bar, but Coach Mendenhall did mention and actually wanted to highlight it for the audience that Ryan Davis led all receivers at Auburn with 100 receiving yards, 8 targets, 6 receptions, and he's kind of emerged as a top target for Devin Dampier now. Although we saw some of the tougher plays being made by Wysong, that just gives him another weapon on the outside. I think he's kind of emerged as target number 2 or option number 2. And then he did also mention that Medford is still kind of battling back from injury. But when you get kind of all 3 receivers healthy, clicking on the same page come Mountain West Conference time, Dampier is able to scramble and find some of his bigger targets. We all can see what all three receivers can do. So I think they're well equipped. It's just a matter of endurance and just constantly being able to deliver, convert third downs in the second half, and having the defense show up for you a little bit. So on the defensive side of things, Rick, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what's your take there? Have you really seen any improvements in the first 3 weeks of the season?
Unfortunately, I have not. And you would think going against a freshman quarterback and Hank Brown for Auburn, they would have brought pressure more often from a variety of ways. Well, they finished with 0 sacks, and he looked pretty much like a statue back there to me. And to me, they didn't challenge his mobility one time. That's concerning because they didn't put any pressure on him with the front four or when they brought the blitz. So that's a huge problem moving forward because, as Nick was saying, the margin for error is so small now because of their lack of defensive stopping ability at this part. They're, I think, over -50 in scoring margin so far this season. Well, I know they faced one of the tougher non-conference schedules in the entire country. We haven't seen much of any change from the defensive coordinator or really the schemes. And along with the special teams issues, we brought it up when they're going for 2 points early on. They finally set up that crazy formation correctly, and I think the tight end, what's his name, Bruckler, who I love, I think he's a weapon also, but he moved too early and then I think got hurt also, so they didn't get those two. So, there's 3 phases of the game, and in that game, defense and special teams severely hurt them, not just with the penalty. They gave up a big return also to open the game. So there's lots of room for improvement on that side of the ball, and I think it has to come quickly. There has to be some type of time in the game where they can count on getting a stop because, as we're seeing in the second half, they're not slowing anyone down, and UNM, if they have one turnover or one miscue, or they can't overcome one obstacle, then the game's already out of hand by the fourth quarter. So moving forward, I don't know what they can do on defense, to be honest. It's just a lack of consistency and a lack of playmaking.
I'll add to that, Eric. I mean, if there is one positive that we can see on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, they forced, I guess, is technically 5 turnovers in 3 games because they had the scoop and score against Montana State, and then they scored another defensive score in the second half against Montana State. They forced an interception against Arizona. They forced a fumble at the end of the first half against Auburn. Now, it was raining, and would the guy have fumbled if the ball wasn't wet? Who knows? And then Luke Wysong did recover the muffed punt. So they're able to generate some turnovers and make plays in that regard. But as Rick was saying, I mean, they're just very, very inconsistent. Sean Ryder's article in the Journal a couple days ago, he calculated, how we're getting outscored in the second half. I think it's 83-28 in the 3 second halves that we've had. And some of that is depth, like Rick was talking about when we initially started breaking down UNM football. We've got injuries, and it's guys that, are kind of the second or third guy in the rotation that might be a little banged up. They're limited on a snap count. One of the guys that Coach Mendenhall talked about at the press conference, I think it was the last question that was asked, was cornerback or defensive back Cam Watts. If I'm not mistaken, I think he may have started against Montana State, and he only gets 5 snaps against Auburn. So I think they are banged up. They're not deep. Hopefully playing against Mountain West competition, the game isn't as physical. I mean, I think that's another thing to talk about when you're playing against an SEC team like Auburn that goes 3 deep. I mean, it's a physical game, and you're going to get banged up. So hopefully they're able to find some things, whether it's schematically, whether it's getting healthy, so that the defense can kind of turn the page.
And one thing that will help that defense that I've already mentioned, but I hope someone tells the coaches this, is running the football. Eli Sanders had 7 carries, I think, for 70 yards. Why not give him the ball more? I don't understand this game plan of constantly making Devin scramble for his life. I mean, he can do it and it's nice to have, but you have to set up the play action through run. If they always know what's coming, the coverage sags back. We saw Wysong double teamed multiple times. The coverage was draped all over these guys as we saw the interception. So running the ball will solve a lot of problems, not only on offense, but it'll give, the defense a rest because they're getting melted out there.
Yeah, I knew about the 7 carries for 72 yards, but it looked like Devin Dampier threw the ball 44 times, and as a team, they ran the ball 26 times. So a little lopsided for our liking. And I agree with you. I thought Eli Sanders looked good. Javen Jacobs looked good. They kind of hit a second gear. They just need more opportunities, and they just need to keep converting those first downs. And that's how you wear down a defense and keep your defense on the sideline for rest, is to keep converting first downs and keep pushing the ball. So, you guys have any other thoughts moving on to Fresno State? I know that Fresno took Michigan, I wouldn't say down to the wire, but I think in the third or fourth quarter, they were within a 1-score or 2-score game, even though Michigan's a little down this year. Have you had a chance to watch them play?
I have not yet, but the one thing I'm remembering is Lobos were 28-point dogs last year and beat them, if memory serves me correctly. So a lot of players are going to be remembering that on both sides. I know we had the reporter from Fresno State on earlier with Ryan Taylor Martinez, and she, gave us the expectations for this team this year, and they're very high with, returning quarterback Mikey Keene. And right now I'd say they look like they're right on schedule, getting that experience at Michigan and then smashing New Mexico State last week. I think they're right where they want to be from my perspective.
I watched a little of them, Eric, in week 1 in week 2, because their game was on before UNM played Arizona. And it was a competitive game in the fourth quarter when Fresno State went up to the Big House and played Michigan. Michigan went up 16-3. I want to say it was in the fourth quarter, and then Fresno State answered 7 plays, 75 yards. They punched back. So I think they are for real. I mean, if that's their only loss, and they've been pretty competitive in the last couple of weeks. They just destroyed New Mexico State. So, I mean, they're tough. We have beat them, 2 out of the last 3 times? I think if we remember in the COVID season when the UNM football team had to live up in Las Vegas. I don't know if it was the last game of the year or second to last game of the year, but we did beat them in Las Vegas. So 2 out of the last 3 times we have beaten them. I'm sure they know that, like Rick was saying, when we beat them last year at their place. So they're not going to take this game lightly. Business trip for them for sure. So, UNM's going to have to be ready.
Right on. Well, before we wrap up, I want to pose the question to some of the viewers and then, again, you guys. So if anyone wants to chime in real quick towards the end of the show, we asked earlier, where do you see UNM fitting in when all of this kind of shakes out here in the next 2 years with conference realignment? Where do you want to see them fit in? Do you want to see them kind of help reshape the Mountain West? Do you want to see them move further out west in the Pac-12, start something new there? What's your guys' take on it? Go ahead and give it another minute or so to think about it, and I'll just kind of cover some other announcements. We talked with Ryan. Ryan's actually going to come on tomorrow with a guest. We've had him on before, and his name is slipping my mind, but he covers UNL. Joe, yeah, there you go. Agio or something like that from you.
Last name's escaping me.
Yeah,
big UNLV, Joe.
Yeah, so he's going to cover UNLV. UNLV is kind of the talk of the G5 world now, with some of their recent wins against Kansas, and that's who they just beat. Who's the first team they beat? That one's slipping my mind. Houston.
I did watch a lot of that Kansas game actually, and it was a really odd game. They barely threw the football, and their quarterback Sluka was just running time after time again, and Kansas couldn't stop it. It was kind of a bizarre game to watch, but hats off to them. They stopped KJ Jefferson on that last drive and held. So did they get ranked? I believe 25th, and the coaches poll
25th.
week, and the media still has their head up their ass, so they had them in the 30s. But hats off to them.
Yeah, so they're kind of the talk of everything now, and especially with realignment, they're kind of one of the teams that are being, I think, considered or rumored to be joining the Pac-12, or at least targeted by the Pac-12. So I think that they might be one of the next ones to go. But I know that the whole thing with Nevada and the state commission and wanting to include Reno in that conversation too might be something that holds them back from that. But Ryan's going to have him on. They'll talk some UNLV and kind of what they're feeling out in Vegas right now. That's kind of some unprecedented territory for that program. And then I think they're going to get a guest on from Fresno who covers that program on a regular basis. So we'll get an inside look at them, and then we'll kick off the show at 7:00 with Nick and Ed Nunez, talking some local soccer coach. Remind me of her name again, Nick.
Yeah, Amy Fankum, head girls soccer coach at Hope Christian.
Got it. So, question of the night, Rick, what you got?
Well, I'm already reading some of the comments here, and I think I feel like it's hard for me to even think about life without the Mountain West at this point. I've invested a lot of time and thoughts and heart into this conference, especially over the last few years here. If I wanted the best for New Mexico, I would want them to join the new Pac-12 or Pac-10. Knowing that that's not going to happen, I think I would just wish for the Mountain West to get some new schools or link with another conference and keep moving forward. So I think hopefully they can keep the Mountain West Conference and get some bigger schools. I think that's the best hope right now. But at this point, they could move elsewhere as well. So,
Nick?
I'm aligned with Rick on this one. I mean, I think it'd be tough for UNM to get into the Pac-6 now or whatever it becomes. UNM just has not been competitive in football really since 2015, 2016. We beat this horse dead. That's really what it takes to get into a Power 4, Power 5 conference is production at the football level. So right now, until UNM turns that around, I don't think that's an option. And I also agree with Rick and, some of the comments that we have now is we should stay put in the Mountain West, see what happens, feel it out over the next, 3 to 6 months. Air Force is likely going to leave for the AAC. There's a lot of good candidates out there. I mean, we can pull from the Big Sky. The Montanas are competitive football programs. I don't know too much about their basketball programs. If New Mexico State comes in to the conference, well, then, we wouldn't have to schedule 2 basketball games against New Mexico State every year because they'd be in our conference. UTEP, that'd be another good rivalry to refuel. So I think for right now, knowing what we know now, staying put in the Mountain West and seeing what everybody else does is the best move for UNM.
Yeah, before I give my answer, I'm going to go to some of the comments just to see what everyone else is saying. But looks like J-Rod 17, it's so hard to think that the Mountain West could be done. I'm 35 and pretty much that's all I've known. Hey, same here, man. I'm diehard Mountain West, especially on the basketball side. I've kind of grown up with those rivalries even through college. It's the San Diego State, the UNLV, the Boise State, the Utah States of the world. I know that Utah State was one of the last teams to kind of join the conference, so they're a little bit newer, but some of the other ones have been around since kind of the inception of the league. So let's see. I think Jimmy H would agree with where we kind of sit. Love the Mountain West as it was. And who knows? Like I feel like this is kind of like an ongoing, evolving thing. Who knows if this is going to be the first time that conferences realign, might be realigned later down the road if some way UNM finds a way to build their football program and basketball continues to build on itself and their success. I mean, who knows? There might be like an invite to the Big 12 or the Big 12 looks at expanding multiple teams because they definitely fit within that region, right? Arizona's west of New Mexico and they're in the Big 12. So, I mean, I don't know how, I mean, obviously I think that's a shot for the Stars, but I don't think anything's out of question at this point. David Fresquez, the RMAC. Come on, dude.
Let's not forget that the WAC was once a 16-team conference that expanded from Tulsa all the way to California, and those 8 teams broke off and broke our heart to move to the Mountain West and form the conference. So this has happened before, and there is light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully.
Yeah. And John Romero, if UNM is nice to NMSU, we might synergize with Lobo then. Hey, I've always been a pro UNM New Mexico State rivalry. I think it's good for the state. I think it's good for both programs when both programs in both sports, football and basketball, are competitive to kind of strengthen each other's schedule. And I would like to see them in the same conference if everyone would just to kind of elevate their level of play. Go ahead, Rick.
And compare it to, I mean, look what Colorado and Colorado State just put on. And the week before that, you had Iowa and Iowa State. I know they're not in the same conference, but these state-to-state rivalries mean something nationwide, and I think it would be cool. I'm all for it too.
And there he is, Mr. Ed Nunez. UTEP and UNM had some great games back in the WAC days. That's what you guys were just talking about. So maybe a little bit before my time, but I've heard all the stories. Don Haskins, one of my favorite coaches ever, beloved in the pit. Him and Storm and Norman were a riot. UTEP had a rich basketball tradition. Last from me, Ronnie, you're not giving him the respect. Let's see here. Any other comments I want to show there? Here's Ronnie Chavez. Mountain West should have been proactive and invited other schools, knowing the Pac-2 was there to pluck your schools away. Yeah, I think we kind of covered that in the last show. I think Rick posed the question on should Gloria Navarro's position be evaluated. I don't think you asked that, but that's all I got for tonight, guys. I know we got a kind of a jam-packed show for tomorrow, starting at 7, so an hour earlier because we're going to do some more high school sports stuff. So we'll see you guys then. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow.